Now, you might have heard the saying, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Now, what we need to really understand from this is that the tapestry of life is always connected to its history. We need to learn from history for many reasons, but I would like to bend my scope to a more specific subject, slavery. So, try to understand that the misconceptions of history is hanging on just one single thread, and it's on its verge to be completely broken. So the first misconception that we really need to address here is that slavery was just a southern thing. Now, when we look into America, you need to understand that it's separated as a southern and northern. But when we think about how slavery was in the southern, we always try to link it with something like the cuisine as well. But let's move our director somewhere further, like the northern. Let's say we mention something like New York City. Now, when we think about New York City, it's always about the pizza and Wall Street. But if we look a lot more deeper into it, what we can see is something very interesting. Slave insurance was something that they offered to their people. Now, let's say you were a slave owner back then, and you brought your slave. You can apply for, say, slave insurance, and it will apply once your slave escapes or dies out of, obviously, some weird circumstances. And you'd get the compensation from that. Now, that itself goes on to show how these people were viewed as property, and how this fact is not being brought up to light. And that itself is why misconceptions itself create division. So moving on to the next, basically the next part. So all enslaved people were African, right? Now this is one of the most dangerous misconceptions simply due to the fact that this is not true. While the transatlantic slavery was one of the biggest issues, and while it was highlighted throughout, this is not true. Simply due to the fact that if we look into history back then, before even America was actually a thing, it was that people, from ancient Rome to Egypt, slavery itself was large. And if we really think about it, these people these stuff are also mentioned in the Bible itself. But try to understand that when we talk about enslaved people, aside from the transatlantic slave trade, it itself goes on to show how exactly we have minimized our brains in order to think that when we even picture something like slavery, it's always tied down to something like color itself, which is simply not true. Because if we go all the way back, color, ethnicity almost did not really matter even before America was the thing. So let's say you were in a civil war and you were in the losing side. No matter what color you were, the type of person you were always going to be captured. And that was the issue. And that's one of the most underlying facts that needs to be brought up. And that, my friends, brings the second issue, which was ignorance. Now, some slave owners were kind, was a statement that some people claimed. Now, this itself is already disturbing to hear, right? Now, even though some of these slave owners weren't, quote-unquote, physically abusing these people, we cannot deny the fact that these people were considered to be basically property. That's why it links all the way back to the insurance part, where these people were seen as nothing but property. So now, we know that the saying that Africans sold their own people, so they are entirely to blame. Now, some of you might have not even noticed that African leaders themselves actually sold their own people, right? That they were against, or their own color as well. But this does not mean that we had to put the blame entirely on them. Because if we go and span our horizon to somewhere like Eastern Europe, you need to understand that these people were the ones who created the slave demand, and through this, these people try to profit from it. So, once again, this is a failure from all nations to actually minimize the demand itself, and that is why we cannot point fingers on others and claiming such facts.